नेमी निधि और नटरंग प्रतिष्ठान के संयुक्त आयोजन में आपका स्वागत है। श्री नेमीचंद जैन की स्मृति में स्थापित इस व्याख्यान माला में अब तक 9 व्याख्यान हो चुके हैं। आज इसका एक दशक पूरा होने जा रहा है। पहले डॉक्टर मुकुंद लाट, डॉक्टर कृष्ण कुमार, श्री महेश एलकुंचवार और श्रीमती माया राव, श्री कुमार शाहानी, श्री प्रभाष जोशी, श्री गोविंद पुरुषोत्तम देश पांडे, डॉक्टर दीपंकर गुप्त, केदारनाथ सिंह और श्री अनुपम मिश्र के व्याख्यान हो चुके हैं। और हमारा ये सौभाग्य है कि पिछले व्याख्यान देने वाले अनुपम मिश्र इस व्याख्यान के अध्यक्ष हैं। एक तो इसलिए भी कि बहुत अच्छा व्याख्यान देते हैं, इसलिए उनको एक व्याख्यान देने के बाद छोड़ा तो नहीं जा सकता, उनका कुछ न कुछ इस्तेमाल किया जाना चाहिए। नेमी जी की जो बहुत सारी चिंताएं थी, उनमें एक चिंता जो कि हर बड़े लेखक और विचारक की हमारे समय में होती है, एक चिंता है मानवीय नियति का भविष्य, कि हमारी नियति क्या होने जा रही है। यूँ तो आप में से बहुतों को याद होगा कि थॉमस मान ने 20वीं शताब्दी के पूर्वार्ध में ये कहा था कि हमारे समय में मानवीय नियति अपने को राजनैतिक पदावली में व्यक्त करने जा रही है। लेकिन ये एक तरह का अर्ध सत्य ही है, क्योंकि मानवीय नियति का निर्धारण करने वाले अनेक तत्व और अनेक शक्तियां होती, इनमें से एक शक्ति विज्ञान भी। और हमारे समय में विज्ञान का वर्चस्व, और जब किसी चीज़ को आपको प्रशंसा करनी होती है, अपनी विचारधारा को कुछ दूसरी विचारधाराओं से अलग बताना होता है, तो आप कहते हैं हम बड़े वैज्ञानिक दृष्टि रखते हैं। ऐसा आतंक भी, एक तरह का ब्राह्मणवाद भी आप कह सकते हैं, विज्ञान के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। तो इसलिए हमने सोचा कि इसमें और तरह के लोग तो आते रहे हैं, ज़्यादातर साहित्य, रंगमंच, फिल्म के लोग, तो इस बार किसी वैज्ञानिक से आग्रह किया जाए। और डॉक्टर माधव गाडगिल ने कृपापूर्वक हमारा निमंत्रण स्वीकार किया। उनका चुनाव भी हमने थोड़े विचार पूर्वक ही किया, क्योंकि बहुत सारे वैज्ञानिक हैं, श्रेष्ठ वैज्ञानिक हैं, लेकिन उनकी कोई समाज चिंता नजर नहीं आती। उनको अपने काम में ही शायद इतने मुब्तला रहते हैं कि दिन दुनिया की खबर उनको नहीं होती है। और अक्सर वैज्ञानिक एक तरह की भव्य संकीर्णता में कैद रहते हैं। भव्य इसलिए कि उनका काम बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, मूल्यवान है, लेकिन फिर भी संकीर्णता है, क्योंकि वो दुनिया में क्या हो रहा है इसकी चिंता बहुत नहीं करते। सौभाग्य से डॉक्टर माधव गाडगिल ऐसे वैज्ञानिक हैं जो पर्यावरण की चिंता करने वाले और अपने विज्ञान के सारे ज्ञान का प्रभुत उपयोग पर्यावरण के संरक्षण, उसके लिए किए जा रहे प्रयत्न इत्यादि में करते हैं। उनका बायोडेटा विशाल है और उनके पुरस्कारों की संख्या भी बहुत लंबी है। वो मुझसे 1 वर्ष छोटे हैं और वो पहले वो हार्वर्ड में पढ़ा चुके हैं, बर्कले में पढ़ा चुके हैं, स्टैनफोर्ड में पढ़ा चुके हैं, और इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ साइंस में भी वो 1973 से 2004 तक रहे हैं, जहां उन्होंने सेंटर फॉर इकोलॉजिकल साइंसेज स्थापित किया था। उनको अनेक विज्ञान अकादमियों के अलंकरण मिले हैं, जिनमें हमारी अपनी भारत की बहुत सारी विज्ञान अकादमियाँ, Third World Academy of Sciences and the US National Academy of Sciences. और वैज्ञानिकों को इस देश में जितने पुरस्कार मिल सकते हैं वो सभी उनको मिले, यानी उनको शांति स्वरूप भटनागर, विक्रम साराभाई, वोल्वो एनवायरमेंट प्राइज, हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी सेंटेनियल मेडल, कर्नाटक का राज्योत्सव अवार्ड और पद्म भूषण। उन्होंने बहुत सलाह दी है, प्रधानमंत्री से लेकर वो एडवाइजरी, साइंस एडवाइजरी काउंसिल टू प्राइम मिनिस्टर में रहे हैं, नेशनल एडवाइजरी काउंसिल में रहे हैं, साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी एडवाइजरी पैनल, ग्लोबल एनवायरनमेंट फैसिलिटी में रहे हैं, और वेस्टर्न घाट्स इकोलॉजी एक्सपर्ट पैनल, जिसको लेकर अब कुछ विवाद, कुछ द्वंद्व इत्यादि है। तो हम बहुत आभारी हैं उनके कि उन्होंने यहाँ आकर आज एक अदम्य आशावादी की दृष्टि में भारत क्या होगा 2019 में। हम लोग तो 2019 के बारे में अभी सोचना भी हमने शुरू नहीं किया है, क्योंकि 2014 ही इतना भयावह है कि ये कल्पना करना बहुत प्रीतिकर या सुखकर नहीं है। और बहरहाल ये तो वो हैं जो अपने को अदम्य आशावादी कहते हैं। तो इसके पहले ये मैं उनको अपने व्याख्यान के लिए आमंत्रित करूं। आज नटरंग का 96वां अंक प्रकाशित होकर आ गया है। हम चाहेंगे कि न्यासी हैं जो नटरंग प्रतिष्ठान के उनसे आग्रह है कि हमारे अध्यक्ष श्री अमित मिश्र और डॉक्टर गार्गिल को फूल देने का कष्ट करें। और आप डॉक्टर माधव गाडगिल और आप लोग उनके व्याख्यान के बाद कुछ प्रश्नों
maybe I should have spoken in Hindi, but I had not prepared, so you will excuse me. मैं अंग्रेजी में बात करूँगा। पिछले महीने पे तो मैंने भोपाल में एक पूरा 1 घंटे का भाषण हिंदी में दिया था, मगर आज तो मैं आपके सामने ये कोशिश नहीं करूँगा। It is my great privilege and pleasure to be here. I had the privilege of meeting Nemi Chandraji in Bangalore with Sanjay, and I was delighted when Sanjay wrote to me asking me whether I would like to join in paying tribute to him at this 10th lecture. And I thought that जैसे आप अभी कहा अशोक जी ने, ये तो सारा 2014 ही भयावह लग रहा है, तो let me give vent to my perhaps constitutional defect, which is an incorrigible optimism, and try to convince you that there are grounds for being optimistic even in 2040 or any other times. Robert Oppenheimer, who was, I guess, father of atom bomb, he was considered, and had of course reasons to wonder whether this is a nice world at all, because he saw the atom bomb being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then himself became a victim of the anti-communist witch hunt after Second World War in United States. And he has to say this, that optimist thinks this is the best of all possible worlds. The pessimist fears it's true. And although this is not a very nice word, nevertheless it is the best of all possible worlds, is what Oppenheimer meant. I do not know how to imagine all possible worlds, but I certainly find this a fascinating world. And Ashok ji ne kaha, I am only 1 year younger to him, so I have also seen a fair bit of the world over the years, and I find that it is getting more and more fascinating day by day. And the reason why it is getting fascinating is perhaps best captured in this view of John Maynard Smith, an eminent evolutionist, and one of the nicest books on evolution in recent years is a book called Major Transitions in Evolution. And John Maynard Smith talks about 9 transitions, beginning with origin of life, about which Sanjay and I were discussing a lot today, till the present times. And he says all of these 9 transitions, they are characterized by increasing abilities to handle greater and greater quantities and more complex information. So life is about handling information and getting better and better at handling information. And I will skip his first 6 transitions. The 7th, he says, is origin of animals like us with nervous system. So of course nervous system is an important prerequisite to handling information. 8th is the origin of social animals. We too of course are a preeminently social animal, and social animals through their communication handle so much more information, but humans are special in our language abilities, and that was his 9th transition. Now, students of human evolution talk about what is it about humanity that makes us special, that has allowed us to so completely dominate the biosphere. And the hypothesis they propose is that humans have come to dominate primarily because they are the only animal which can elaborate knowledge. And elaboration of knowledge has been made possible by our language, which has infinite capacity in a sense. And John Maynard Smith, as I said, talks about this transition as his 9th transition, and he postulates, the book was written in 2001 I think, he postulates that the 10th transition, which is impending, is universal access to entire store of human knowledge, to all the information of slightest relevance to all human beings, for all humans. And this, he says, would be, of course, going along his series of transitions of using more and more information, in a way the culmination of evolutionary transitions. And people, as I said, are perhaps special because of our ability to elaborate knowledge, and we thirst, or at least many of us thirst for knowledge, for understanding, for information, and derive pleasure on this thirst being satisfied. And possibly the reason for my incorrigible optimism is that I am maybe thirstier than many other people for knowledge. And today is the golden age of Wikipedia, if I may say so. Wikipedia, you might be aware, this is a completely free encyclopedia, web-based encyclopedia, which has been created as a collaborative endeavor of all sorts of people, and not at all necessarily experts at all. There are hundreds of thousands of people who have participated in developing these Wikipedia. They are in many languages. The English Wikipedia has the largest number, but there are Hindi Wikipedias. I think amongst the Indian language Wikipedias, Hindi has the largest number of articles, maybe Telugu next, Marathi next, and so on. So you have all the major Indian languages, there are Wikipedias, and essentially anything that you want to know about, today at a click of the mouse, the Wikipedia tells you very often very good information of what is going on and very rapidly. So when there was this tsunami in the Bay of Bengal, within hours there were pictures and very good information on the tsunami in the Wikipedia. At that time, Encyclopedia Britannica was still very much, the commercial encyclopedia was very much in competition, and it takes years for an article on tsunami, something like tsunami, to appear in Encyclopedia Britannica. But Encyclopedia Britannica had large sales and lot of money, and they were engaged in a whole lot of propaganda against Wikipedia. They said, how can there be an open participatory encyclopedia? Human beings are at heart nasty, and therefore they will write all sorts of articles which will be full of wrong, false information. And of course nobody is making any money out of it, and human beings at heart both are nasty and greedy, and this will be a failure. They tried some tricks also. They had some article written which said that maybe Madhav Gandhi is dead when I was very much alive, so to say. And then they made propaganda saying, look, these kind of articles are appearing in Wikipedia. Wikipedia slowly developed a system, and today it is an outstanding source of knowledge. So what 14 years ago, it started in 2000, was expected by all votaries of free market to be a very rapid failure, has become an instant success. And my optimism was especially fueled when I have two granddaughters, 7 and 9 years old, and they are of course always coming up with the latest Hindi film songs which are popular and dances which are popular. And last year there was this movie Chennai Express, Deepika Padukone and Shah Rukh Khan. And there is it's called Lungi Dance, and they started doing the Lungi Dance before me. And the Lungi Dance has the following lines: घर जाके गूगल कर लो, विकिपीडिया में मेरे बारे में पढ़ लो. So what was supposed to be a total failure in 2000 was in 2014 part of popular even Hindi film culture. So, and I went and looked up Shah Rukh Khan in Wikipedia, and of course there is a lot of good material on Shah Rukh Khan amongst others in the Wikipedia. So you have a demonstration that it is not that only profit, only selfishness, only greed, only nastiness will work. That human beings can be cooperative, can be very productive without that kind of motivation. And therefore, the United States, with its value system of throwaway, extremely resource wasteful economy, willingness to wage wars under false pretenses to satisfy their greed for oil and other resources. Now all of this in 2014, maybe what makes us bhayavah, I suppose, is maybe part of it is this, but I think we did not believe that it will necessarily overwhelm us. It certainly is an issue, but I think we should be hopeful that there are possibilities of a different world order, and that this, amongst other things, this evolutionary advance of our ability to appreciate, use more and more information will lead us in a direction of hope. At another end, I have here a map of a forest. Now this is in Gadchiroli district. Gadchiroli is in news very often because of Naxalite violence. Continually, Naxalites killing primarily police and police killing Naxalites. This has been going on for years. In the heart of this Naxal country is a village called Mendalekha, where since 1991 I have spent many years. And this the villagers have fought against the system, India enacted an act called Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Rights over the Forest Act. And if these rights are assigned actually as per the law now, then one of the problems would be that much of these tribal areas are also very rich in coal and other minerals, and then it will pose problems for the miners. And therefore, the all the bureaucracy, political system have tried to ensure that this act will not be implemented. And over much of the country it has not been implemented. And when this campaign against the act was going on, many displaced nature lovers, misguided nature lovers, large number of whom are very good friends of mine, they campaigned against the act. They said that if the act is implemented, the tribals will instantly destroy forests. Actually what has happened is act has not been implemented, tribals cannot claim their rights, and miners have instantly started destroying forests. It is not that tribals have done that. But Gadchiroli district, for reasons which are maybe historic, some accidental, the kind of leadership which has been available, has made sure that as per the act there are two kinds of rights. There is individual land under cultivation over which some rights are given, but more importantly community forest resources, community rights. And this particular village, Mendalekha, has been given 1800 hectares as community forest resource. As I said, they are my friends for over 2 decades. I have been working with them. The first decision they took when being given this these rights was twofold. Firstly, that they will use the forest resources over which the non-timber resources, not the timber, the other non-timber resources over which they now have the rights, very carefully, sustainably, and begin to derive good income. So earlier, what they were getting by cutting a bamboo for the paper mill as laborers was 5 rupee per bamboo. Today all of them are earning as their own property. The Gram Sabha employs them, not the paper mill, 40 rupee per bamboo. So they have themselves got large income, and the additional income goes to the Gram Sabha, which has now in its bank balance some over 1 crore of rupees, and which they are using carefully. But more interestingly, they decided that they will protect, not just use but protect. And here on this map, those green patches you see, they carefully selected areas such that over these 1800 hectares, this is about 12% of that, they have set up what they call in the Gondi language Pengeda, which is the sacred grounds, and that they will not touch them, they will protect them. And I had the privilege of working with them, collecting data in the field with them, and suggesting to them what might be the right choices for this kind of an area anyway. And this is happening, and this is not just in one village. Now something like 900 villages in that district have been given these rights, and I think there is every reason to hope that this will be, perhaps, well, to my mind, I am convinced this is the only way we are ever going to combat Naxalism, which is a serious issue in many parts of India. So there are, as I said, there are good reasons to be optimistic. So the two vital resources for humans are, of course, information, one, and energy is the other. As the information communication technologies have been developing, and I have been very interested over the years in these and trying to understand what is happening, we have seen now there is very good technologies of rendering text to speech and speech to text also. So you don't have to be literate to be able to take advantage of this technology. And some friends of mine, they have whole banking systems developed in parts of rural Karnataka, where many women who are using this banking system are completely illiterate. but using symbols and various other ways, icons, they are able now to very effectively bank. So this barrier is being lowered. And now you have also translation, and translation is getting more and more efficient. And indeed, I think in coming years, perhaps hopefully soon, there will be possibility of going from translating from any language in the world to any other language in the world. So the language barrier will also disappear. So this important, these two, the literacy and language barrier, which are certainly hampering maybe 60% of the Indian population be able to become active citizens, will be overcome. And now solar energy. There is an interesting personal experience. When I became in 1963 eligible to vote, turned 21 years old. And by that time, Homi Bhabha had convinced me that through his writing, and I was staying in Pune, and he was a very powerful figure in India in general, from Mumbai, Pune, where I was a very dominant personality. He had convinced me, and Jawaharlal Nehru, I guess, and many others, that atomic energy would soon be an abundant energy for everybody for all times to come. That human beings very soon in the 60s, maybe by the end of the decade of 60s, will not have to think of energy as a constraint for what they wish to do. Except, of course, there were skeptics. And one of the skeptics was the mathematician, historian D.D. Kosambi. He was a colleague of Bhabha's. Bhabha was then director of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research also, apart from his involvement with Atomic Energy Commission, and Kosambi was a mathematician working at the IFR. And Kosambi wrote there's a collection of his essays, he calls it exasperating essays. So in these exasperating essays, he wrote that solar energy is what India should focus on, that Bhabha's promise and emphasis that we should go in for atomic energy is very much misplaced. We will be wasting a lot of money and energy in all of this. Instead, India should now decide and try to become the leader in solar energy. So as I said, this was in 1960. So by now we know that Bhabha's promises certainly not been fulfilled, that atomic energy is not the answer to humanity's energy needs, and there are other issues with it. But when India did not take the lead in solar energy development, eventually China did. And about 4 years ago, Chinese decided that they have these horrible problems of coal-based power production and pollution, which persist today. Nevertheless, China decided that something serious has to be done about it, and the answer for China will be solar energy. So they started working on the manufacturing technology for solar cells seriously. All these years, United States had made sure that solar energy will not become economical, and all our Chief Minister of Maharashtra even today goes around giving speeches that atomic energy is the right answer. Amongst other astounding thing, he calls it green energy, and he says solar energy is so much more expensive, solar energy is not the answer. Well, he may go on talking like that, but today the fact is that with Chinese interest, the price of solar cells has come down in 3 years to 1/6 of what it was 3 years ago. And now there is so-called crossover point. Solar energy is very much cheaper than atomic energy. And it is certainly now possible in India to seriously go in for solar energy and have a decentralized, readily available source essentially throughout the country. Therefore, as I said, what you will have eventually is that people in our countryside, and 60% of our people are in the countryside, they will therefore have now both access to information and access to energy. Well, maybe not by 2019, I hope it by 2090, but certainly this is going to come through. That people who are today disempowered, and these are the people who are basically dependent for their livelihoods, for their health, on the health of our natural resource base. Raymond Dasman has used this term ecosystem for them, and many of them, when they are, maybe their livelihoods are destroyed by mining or pollution and so on, have become ecological refugees. These classes of people hopefully will now have overcome the two major barriers, energy and information, in years to come. We also are seeing all along now, as we are one of the major tools of the governing classes to keep their hold over the world is to classify all sorts of things as secrets. And of course we have fortunately been able to take a very important step in our democracy, the Right to Information Act, and this hold of secrets has been weakened. Nevertheless, there are all sorts of ways to keep things secrets, and as I said, therefore, to my mind, some of the greatest heroes of today are people like Anna Hazare and Aruna Roy, who campaigned for right to information successfully, and now those who are sabotaging the world powers' attempts to continue to maintain secret, people like Julius Assange with his WikiLeaks, and Edward Snowden, who is now a refugee in Russia, having revealed all sorts of things about United States nasty ways of spying on everybody. So these are, to my mind, people who will make sure in coming years, because the technology makes it very difficult to keep in secrets, that world will be stripped of secrets, and I think it will be a much better world when it is stripped of secrets. So in this age, where information will readily become available, the world will be stripped of secrets, I visualize that the United States democracy, which we talk so much about, is, as Joseph Stiglitz, one of the distinguished economists of the United States, has called it. He said it's not a one person, one vote democracy, but $1, one vote democracy. Now, I think this $1, one vote democracy will be slowly give way, and there are signs that it is giving way towards direct participatory democracy. And I think this is the kind of system we should be thinking of. To a substantial extent, it already exists in the cantons of Switzerland and other places. What we want is direct participatory democracy, and once we move to that, and technology will make this possible. It is already, in a sense, certainly technically feasible. The drive will take us there, and then you will have a whole series of revolutions. If there is direct democracy, vote bank politics will be abolished. And with the abolition of vote bank politics, politicians will not be continually stoking fires of caste and communal discord. And we will develop a very diverse yet harmonious society, is my hope. And direct democracy will also rein in the exploitation of India's countryside and the ecosystem people who live in the countryside. Today what is happening is that we have J.C. Kumarappa, this Gandhian economist, called it economy of violence. I am afraid in the country today we have an economy of violence, where the organized industries, services sector, which my good friend Amit tells me employs maybe only 9% of the country's people, that sector is, in a sense, predating upon the rest of the economy, the resources which sustain the rest of the population. And I think once we begin to have genuine direct democracy, then this exploitation will be reined in, that instead of this economy of violence, we will have an economy of mutualism that certainly we want, and the organized industry services sector will continue hopefully to flourish, but not as a predator on the rest of the countryside and the people, but as one with mutualistic relationships with those sectors. And perhaps then we will revive our Buddhist heritage. Now, this is a lecture which Dalai Lama gave some time ago in Delhi actually. So I have a quotation from Dalai Lama. He says, caring for nature must go hand in hand with respect for fellow human beings. Since I deeply believe that basically human beings are of a gentle nature, so I think the human attitude towards our environment should be gentle. Not only should we keep our relationship with our other fellow human beings very gentle and non-violent, but it is very important to extend that kind of attitude to the natural environment. So part of my optimism is that indeed we will make this transition with the empowerment of people with information and decentralized energy sources. We will move not only towards the harmonious human relationships, but also towards the harmonious relationship with our natural world. Now, I was very happy that our new Prime Minister decided, she chose Bhutan as the first country to visit. I do not know how much he actually has decided to emulate it, but nevertheless, I had an opportunity to go to Bhutan, and when you land in Bhutan at the Paro airport, you have big billboards, and those billboards are not in India. Of course, when you land and see big billboards, they are generally about congratulations to 70 whatever third birthday of some political leader or other. There are no such billboards in Bhutan. The billboards say, we are a country which is dedicated to gross national happiness and not to maximizing gross national product. And they have had an opportunity actually to spend some 2-3 days with the newly elected members of Bhutan Parliament. Bhutanese king must be one of the few people who has very voluntarily surrendered power. He was quite popular, there was no real opposition to him, but he declared that he is going to set up democratic system, and he voluntarily handed over power. Now you have a parliament. And I had, as I said, opportunity to talk to some of these parliamentarians, and I was asking, what are the pillars of your gross national product, happiness, pursuit of happiness? They said 3 major planks are good care of environment, ensuring good governance, and nurturing reciprocity and trust amongst all segments of the society. And I think these are, I hope that our Prime Minister has decided that this is what we want to also ensure in India, and hopefully we will therefore begin to move towards my optimistic vision of India 2019. Here are the ingredients that I personally favor. First, building upon these Buddhist values, holding a country like Bhutan rather than USA as the inspiration, or China, looking all the time to China and we must do better than China. So let's get rid of our obsession with USA or China and begin to think of Bhutan as maybe the right model for us. The Bhutanese, as I said, model is very much an Indian model, at least rooted in Indian culture. And of course there are other parts of the world, the European ideals of openness and democracy, and they are beginning to march towards direct democracy is something we should be certainly moving towards. We must take full advantage of modern science and technology, but we must actively safeguard against humans becoming redundant, which is a real threat. With modern technology, automation is increasingly becoming so powerful that basically you can get rid of humans at all levels. So they are saying that you can now have in United States, this is discussed in United States, you have robots which can flip hamburgers from one side to the other. So the lowest paid jobs in United States are those who are sitting there frying hamburgers to the client. Those jobs can be taken away by robots. At the other end are intellectual jobs, and my son is a mathematician, and one of the areas of his interest is automated proving of new mathematical theorems, and new mathematical theorems are being proved in an automated fashion, and the computing power has become so cheap that you can hire for something like I think 40 rupees an hour or so a computing power which is adequate to defeat the world chess champion in the computerized chess game. So you have at both ends, at this most menial of jobs to most intellectually demanding jobs, computers are beginning to take over and humans can become utterly redundant. And this is something certainly we want to take advantage of this science and technology. As I said, that is what has made amongst other things the Wikipedia as possible. But we have to safeguard against humans becoming redundant. And actually in India, one of the reasons why the economic growth is not reflected in a better quality of life for people at large is that you have now a situation where I come from Pune. In our Bajaj scooter factory, they employ half the labor they did a few years ago to produce 3 times as many scooters. So people are in the organized sector also actually losing jobs. And so they have 8% rate of economic growth, but the growth of employment in the organized sector has actually gone down. Amit tells me when it was our rate of economic growth was 4%, jobs were going at 2% per year in the organized sector. Now that it went up to 7, 8, 9%, jobs began to grow only at 1% per year. So you have this serious issue, and therefore we must safeguard the human interest against this encroachment of the machines. Nevertheless, we must take advantage of that and must make sure through a variety of means that people are continually prosperously employed in natural resource based labor intensive sectors, which today also employs the bulk of our population. We must safeguard that. And of course finally, I was again, just like I was happy that our Prime Minister visited Bhutan as the first foreign country. The first speech he gave on 16th May after winning the election, he said, "Vikas ko hum janandolan banayenge." And I hope that he is actually going to do something about it. I have not yet figured out. I have some very good friends involved with BJP in Maharashtra. I asked them to, "Vikas का जनांदोलन आप कैसे बना रहे हो?" वो बोले नहीं, अभी तो चुनाव होने वाले हैं महाराष्ट्र में, उसमें तो पैसे चाहिए, उसके बाद इसके बारे में बात करें. So I hope that they will actually begin to walk the talk and do something about विकास को जनांदोलन बनाना. And I think having come back from Bhutan, the Prime Minister will also seriously give it a thought whether we can think of not growth in economic terms but gross national happiness as a goal, as Bhutan does. And that requires, as I said, respect and compassion for nature and people, as Dalai Lama has said. And I want to talk, I started talking about my optimism by showing you this picture of the Mendalekha, a map of the community forest of Mendalekha, and all these sacred groves which they have newly created. Now, if we are to move in this direction, there are many things we can do, but two things, but I want to conclude by talking of something which I personally am involved in and would like to see happen. There are acts like Biological Diversity Act and this Forest Rights Act. Both these acts, in fact, are about simultaneously respecting nature and people, simultaneously getting people at the ground level involved in protecting nature, but not just protecting nature, but sustainably using and benefiting from it. And this is the way I think we should move. I come back to this Mendalekha. As I said, if we are thinking seriously of Vikas being made a Janandolan, then they must really learn from places like Mendalekha, where indeed, as I said, over the last 20 years I have seen Vikas has actually been converted into a Janandolan by those people, right? Beginning to take good care of their own natural resources. You enter that village and there is a big billboard, not about gross national happiness, but another very interesting billboard. It says, दिल्ली बम्बई में हमारा सरकार, हमारे गांव में हम ही सरकार. And they are by taking charge of their own environment and carefully, prudently managing it. As I said, they have now come to the situation where economically also, as a result of their struggle and getting the forest, especially the community forest rights, they are far more prosperous than they were before. And all these years, the Naxalites have always been threatening them. They have stood firm, and now they are in a stronger position than ever before to make sure that this threat of Naxalism doesn't enter their village. There is a major Naxalite camp only 6 kilometers from this village, but nevertheless the Naxalites are leaving them alone, and in fact are beginning to see that what these people are doing is really what they should support. The young boys and girls, they are intelligent, but they are almost all of them failed 12th standard because of barrier of English and lack of good mathematics teaching. And those two subjects, they are forever failing. Now we are now doing this assessment and a lot of mathematics is involved, and that is a very interesting experience. Amongst other things, you have to measure the height of the trees. And simplest method is to make an isosceles triangle so that all angles are 60 degrees, and you point it to the top of the tree and measure the distance from the tree to where you are, and of course you need to know the height up to your eye, and you get the height of the tree. So we started demonstrating this method to them. They picked it up after a while, but in a way mechanically picked it up. Then we tried experiments. We took some bamboos which had been felled, we held them erect, they measured the height. I said, okay, let's put them on the ground. Now you measure with a tape. And it turned out that they had got it almost exactly right. I think it was some 6.85 centimeters was the, meters was the actual height of the bamboo. They got 6.87. And they were suddenly inspired. They said, now this is okay, you have taught us this. Now you have to explain to us what is this sine and cos and tan you are talking about. And suddenly they were seriously trying to learn for themselves geometry, which amongst other things they had by 12th standard, they really were supposedly knowing these things but had failed to know, and that's why they were failing in the exam. So a whole new knowledge revolution actually is beginning to happen with these boys and girls. And interestingly, the Gram Sabha is also now debating, and now the Gram Sabha, since it has this income, this girl, for instance, who is measuring, she has been given a fellowship by the Gram Sabha to do the forest study. So this research is not being funded by any government organization, nor by any foreign aid like Swiss aid, about which we hear so much about all these NGOs with their foreign aid. There is no question of foreign aid. They are self-funding this research themselves. And as I mentioned, they have set apart these sacred grounds and protecting, strictly protect about 12% of their resource. So there are many things one should be doing to go in this direction. I just wanted to mention an agenda which is already on our books. These are all parts of laws, except that regretfully all the laws are continually being flouted, these laws. So there are air and water acts to control pollution. There is no action properly being taken. And I have been spent some time in a village on Vashishti river in Konkan region of Maharashtra, where there is a chemical industry complex which is polluting the Vashishti river at levels which are far higher than what is allowed by the Water Act. The complex was set up in 1986. No action has been taken so far against this pollution. But from time to time there are large-scale fish deaths, and the fishermen naturally get agitated and demonstrate, completely non-violent demonstrations. And I went to the Ratnagiri district collector's office and got the statistics for the previous 600 days to when I went there. On 180 days there were such environmental problems, there were demonstrations, and on all 180 days the Ratnagiri collector had evoked police force to suppress the demonstration. So no action to check illegal pollution, but every action to suppress demonstration against illegal pollution. This is, completely against our constitution, against our democratic rights. This is what can change and must change. We have the 73rd, 74th amendments which are giving teeth to local bodies to make decisions on environmental issues. In some relatively progressive states like Kerala, this has been implemented. We must make sure it happens all over the country. There is a Biological Diversity Act 2002 which gives substantial role to the citizens of all local bodies, whether they are panchayats or Mahanagar Palikas, in managing environment. Again, that act is essentially not implemented anywhere. Indeed, a MLA in Goa Assembly, a friend of mine, he called me yesterday. He said that he asked a question in Goa Assembly: what is the Goa government doing to protect Goa's biodiversity? And the Chief Minister replied, we have set up a Biodiversity Board. The interesting story of the Biodiversity Board is, this is an act which is 12 years old. Few years ago, Goa government had set up such a board. And amongst other recommendations the board made was that the public beaches of Goa were being encroached upon. There is interesting beach vegetation which was being destroyed. Goa government should take action against it. After the one meeting in which this discussion was made and this decision was made, there was no further meeting of Biodiversity Board. And the Chief Minister is telling, yes, we are taking care of biodiversity. We have set up a Biodiversity Board. So now these are the kinds of things we must make sure that this doesn't happen. For the crop cultivars, the genetic resources of our crops are quite valuable. And there is an Act 2001 Act which would give special incentive to farmers to continue maintaining, to some extent at least, some of these cultivars on their fields. Till Hanchinal, the new chairman of this authority, is beginning to take action, but for the first 12 years, not a single village was given any such incentive. Though we apply, and as many of my friends from Maharashtra have attempted, there was no, and of course I talked about the Forest Dwellers Act. Then there was almost 20 years ago a scheme called Paryavarana Vahini, that citizens would be made, interested citizens would be made officers, so to say, voluntary under Paryavarana Vahini scheme, and they will have the same powers to inspect environmental offences as factory inspectors or forest officers. And for a while in Karnataka there was a very good secretary, forest secretary. This scheme worked and it began to have an impact. So next year it was discontinued and so it is on the books but it is not being implemented. So these are the kinds of things we must do. Then of course the environmental clearance process today is a complete farce. Again the government of Goa gave me a responsibility 3 years ago to look at the clearances obtained by all the active mines. And there were 104, but actually finally through the government, because it was an official project, I got full documentation for 75 of the mines and discovered that all 75 of the mines were given clearances based on environmental impact assessment reports, which were supposedly prepared by very competent technical people, but which were clearly full of fraudulent statements. So this is you need a complete reform of this environmental clearance process. The reform is not currently what is being talked about, that you speed up the clearances further without any scrutiny by doing it all on the web. So the modern technology should not be used to this way completely sabotage what is the role of the local governments. The Gram Sabhas have a definite role in giving their feedback into this clearance process. What is being done today, as I said, in this new regime is to actually, this was already being done, but now completely bypassed with these kind of web-based clearances. Now, to my mind, this is not the way to make Vikas as an Angolan, and in Goa I have been working for a long time. There is no doubt that the mining has brought in lot of money, but that money has gone to a very small number of people, and the bulk of the people, all they have seen is suffered environmental degradation, including amongst other things, Goans are very fond of fish and shellfish. There are hardly any fish and shellfish left for them to catch and eat in Goa. The employment in the mining sector, in fact, has been going down rapidly. It was earlier, of course, when the mining started, they were using manual digging and there were a lot of people employed. Now you have these huge earth moving machines and hardly anybody gets employment. So there is no employment created for the people. All they suffer is environmental degradation, and none of this need to happen if there is a proper environmental impact assessment. In 1986 the law was made, 1991 the rules were promulgated. It is simply that they are being violated through fraudulent assessments and fraudulent fashion of giving clearances. So I think there are many things that of course in theory are very much possible. Because of our vibrant democracy, we do have a good framework for both empowering people and taking good care of environments, which are of course my personal two concerns. There are undoubtedly other important concerns, but at least for these two concerns, you have the framework. It is not being actually implemented, it is merely being sabotaged. I hope, as I said, that we will move as people get better and better access to information, and hopefully tomorrow energy resources will change this situation, and that in fact in India, Vikas will genuinely become a Janandolan, and I am, as I said, therefore incorrigibly, optimistically looking forward to that happen. Thank you very much.
Now is the time for you to ask questions. Please raise your hands. Be brief. You don't have to give the lecture yourself. It has already been given. So ask brief questions and clarification. Yes. And raise your hand and utter your name.
Hello, sir. So this is Richie Lutharia. I'm a social activist. And I recently read a question about some hydro projects on Yechre river in Arunachal Pradesh. Exactly what you are talking about. and without any environment assessment, they approved, government agency approved 7 projects on a small river that's attracting all its fauna and fauna. And I don't know, Mr. Gidkari is very optimistic and is very happy about it, but I'm really disturbed, and I raised these questions several times with the government. So what do you think about this actually should be?
This is part of, I agree, what is going on. Sorry.
No,
I can stand. So this is what I say, as citizens, we have to do whatever we can to make sure that this is not allowed to happen. That's all we can say.
Afterwards, I tried to check out this news in the Indian Express, and they removed the news, and there was no answer from the government. They are talking about the yes.
I certainly have no specific answers how to go about this. We have to figure out, all of us collectively.
Sorry, Madam, I don't know why I should be asking you any questions. No, I just wanted to raise one point. I think all the concerns that you have talked about are shared by many people, which should make us optimistic enough. But there is a problem with technology. I mean, there is not a single technology which has not put waste on the planet. And there is not a single technology, at least since the Industrial Revolution, which has not excavated the biosphere, the living planet. So your faith in technology, I think, and at least the present mode of technology, is a bit misplaced, I think.
I mean, I agree, but I do not see any way in which you can say that we will halt the progress of technology or use of technology. The only way we can deal with it is by taking also the advantage of the positive fallout. Such as I said, if technology is leading to pollution, then you must make sure that you also develop technologies which will get rid of the pollution, which has been done. But also make sure that it is implementing. To hopefully help in implementing it, we need good information which should reach people. So, to my mind, there is no way one can say that we will stop the development or use of technology. The only right way to my mind is to use the positive features of technology, such as this information revolution, to try to correct what is happening, which is what we don't like to happen. After all, in Europe, Germany, they have completely cleaned up Rhine once again, and they have a lot of chemical industry. So technologies can be developed, and if laws are implemented, which apparently they are much more than in Germany than in India, then things can improve. But yes, you can certainly say, and I agree, that technology is responsible in its own way to a lot of things which we would not like to see happen.
Yeah, no, I have just one remark to make, that I think we need a change in the mode of technology, because it's been driven only by the free market. That's why you see 100 PlayStation, 100 cell phone, 100 golf club. Now, if you look at nature, where we learnt all our science, everything, physics, chemistry, biology, you find that there's a production system which doesn't have any waste. But the post-industrial revolution society didn't care about this at all. So I think we can make technology into something which is non-invasive, which we have not done till today, Germany notwithstanding.
No, fair enough. So certainly there are, as you are saying, big challenges. I do not deny.
मेरा नाम बालाजी है, मैं उड़ीसा से हूँ
जी।
मैं सोच रहा था इतना अच्छा उत्साहवर्धक बहुत कम सुनने को मिलता है, उड़ीसा में होने से तो बिल्कुल नहीं मिलता है। तो पैसा क्यों नहीं आपने इसमें कहीं स्थान दिया इन दोनों के साथ?
अच्छा, नहीं, ये तो क्या, क्योंकि यहाँ तो सब चीज़ों के बारे में बात करना समय नहीं था इसलिए, मगर मैं आपको जरूर मेरा ईमेल मुझे भेज दीजिए, मैं इसका जो विस्तृत व्यापक जो लिखा है उसमें वो भेज दूंगा। उसमें पैसा के बारे में तो काफ़ी बात
नहीं, हम तो जानते, थोड़ा चर्चा होती तो शायद ये और स्पष्ट होता।
तो बिल्कुल सही है, बिल्कुल सही है। पैसा तो एक महत्वपूर्ण है इस दिशा में, इसमें मैंने नहीं मेंशन।
Mr. Gadgil, I am Ravin Tripathi. I have a simple question. There is talk of connecting and interlinking rivers of this country. What do you think about it?
I will see these specific technical questions. I have only one understanding which I wish to share, that the whole series of consequences, both in terms of the economic, the costs involved, the benefits to be realized, the biological, social, all this needs to be examined. Most of these things are being just thrust down the country. We have actually recently, because of this Western Ghat panels, we have looked at number of projects. It is very clear that even technically and economically they are not viable. But because they give large profits to contractors, which they undoubtedly share with others, these projects are being forced down people's throats. So maybe river interlinking is that kind of a project. I cannot offhand say. It has to be carefully examined, but certainly I will say that large number of projects are being thrust on people because instead of, let's say, having a government of people, by people, for people, certainly in Maharashtra you have a government of contractors, by contractors, for contractors. And Chitale, who retired as chairman of Central Water Commission, has given a detailed report, who has documented how instead of engineers, contractors are writing what should go into these various projects. And he says this is scandalizing. There is no scrutiny by the technical people, forget about everybody else. And contractors are preparing the projects, contractors are deciding on how much should be paid, and the conclusion is that at least 21,000 crores have gone down the drain in Maharashtra without any addition to the irrigation. So this is the whole kind of issue which we need to address. I cannot often say about interlinking whether it's good or bad. I think there must have to be a very detailed, careful, open, transparent scrutiny.
Based on two kinds of things. One is unstoppable changes in the world. For example, the rise of things like Wikipedia and the information revolution and so on. And the other pillar on which you base your optimism is hope. Now, the hope of an optimist is not necessarily very solid. I mean, obviously you're an optimist because you hope more than other people do. So I, as a pessimist, would depend more on the unstoppable movements which we all recognize. Now, one of the unstoppable movements that you have recognized as perhaps not being in line with your optimism is the fact that technology is beginning to make human beings kind of redundant. Now, in parallel, you know from this work by Thomas Piketty that it's been shown that in Europe and America more and more of the wealth is going to the wealthiest few percent, and people are becoming on the whole poorer. Now, these are big unstoppable movements, and I don't see what hope we have of counteracting them. Can you give us some hope?
That Buddha tells you that you shall never yield to despair and you shall never yield to anger. So I try to practice it. As you say, as I said, maybe it's a constitutional defect.
मेरे दो छोटे प्रश्न हैं। एक तो जो आपने सौर ऊर्जा के बारे में बताया वो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग था, परंतु उसमें एक टेक्निकल मुद्दे पे मैं आपसे थोड़ी जानकारी चाहूँगा कि स्टोरेज का जो मसला है, और जो एक प्रश्न उठा था अबाउट टेक्नोलॉजी, जो मेरी कम समझ है कि बैटरी इत्यादि चाहिए, सो देयर इज़ अ सॉर्ट ऑफ अ डाउन साइड टू सोलर, तो उसके बारे में कुछ आप अगर टिप्पणी करें। दूसरा जो छोटा प्रश्न है जो मेंढा लेखा का आपने बताया, और मैंने भी थोड़ा बहुत काम झाबुआ में किया है, कि कुछ विलेजेस बड़े मॉर्जिनस होते हैं ट्राइबल, किंतु हमारे उत्तर भारत में जात और इस तरह की वेरी डिवाइडेड जो हेट्रोजिनस और स्ट्रैटिफाइड जो विलेजेस हैं उसमें इस तरह की कोहेसिव एक्शन की क्या उम्मीद करी जा सकती है? तो अगर इन दोनों पर अगर आप टिप्पणी करें तो बहुत मेहरबानी
है। और लेड बैटरीज का इस्तेमाल करें तो पोल्यूशन की भी समस्या है, ये तो सही है। मगर पुणे में कई बिल्डर्स, रियल एस्टेट डेवलपर्स बहुत प्रोग्रेसिव है जो मेरे मित्र हैं, और उन्होंने जो नए प्रोजेक्ट है उसमें रूफटॉप सोलर एनर्जी से वो प्रोजेक्ट्स पूरे सस्टेनेबल बनाए हैं। तो महाराष्ट्र इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बोर्ड की एनर्जी वो बहुत कम इस्तेमाल करते हैं। तो उनसे मैंने पूछा, उन्होंने वो बैटरीज वगैरह वो सारा किया है। तो स्टोरेज प्रॉब्लम डजंट become a bottleneck so that you cannot use solar energy. You have to be careful about disposal of lead and so on. ये तो सही बात है। और दूसरा जो आप कह रहे हैं ये भी सही है कि मेंढालेखा में ये हो सकता है, क्योंकि केवल गोंड समाज के और जो वैसा तो यूनिफाइड कम्युनिटी है उससे होना ज़्यादा संभव है, और जहाँ पे स्ट्रैटिफाइड सोसाइटी विद कास्ट डिफरेंसेस है वहाँ तो मुश्किल है। ये तो बात सही है। तो आई वॉज दिस इज पार्ट ऑफ course what there are of course good reason to become pessimistic. So when I was young and my father was very active in some sense in debate about getting rid of caste in this country, and was I was brought up hoping with him that in some 10, 20, 30 years in independent India, caste will disappear. But it has not, and in fact the politicians are exploiting it more and more. So ये तो सही बात है. Hopefully people will wake up to it.
As you've talked about schemes like the Environmental Clearance and the Forest Act and the Biodiversity Act, and there are also things like the Solar Mission and Millennium Development Goals. All these things are in place, but we see that it's not being able to be implemented the way it should be. So do we really have realistic ground to be optimistic?
We are saying hopefully that we want a society where the laws are obeyed. So Millennium Development Goals are goals. It's a different thing. They are not compulsory in any sense. All I have talked about are, all of them are part of our constitution, of the country's legal framework. And I hope that we will move towards a more lawful society.
ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि आपने अपनी होप में 11वीं ट्रांजिशन क्यों नहीं रखी, जिसमें कि हम ओवरमैन हो।
नहीं वो तो 11वीं के बारे में, ये 10वीं तो होने दीजिए, 10वीं तो होने दीजिए, उसका प्रभाव देखेंगे, फिर सोचेंगे 11वीं के बारे में।
कहना चाहता हूँ आपके लेक्चर से रिलेटेड, मुझे तो कुछ ऐसा लगता है कि इन समस्याओं की जड़ हमारे अपने आप के अंदर है। एक ऐसा दृष्टिकोण है जो कि हम स्वीकारना नहीं चाहते। तो ये जैसे कि मान लीजिए पर्यावरण, अगर हम गंदगी ना फैलाएं तो पर्यावरण की समस्या ना हो। ये गंगा भी मैली ऐसी हुई तो उसको सफाई करने के लिए टेक्नोलॉजी की जरूरत पड़ी और बहुत कुछ सोचना पड़ा। तो क्या हम ऐसा कोई रास्ता निकाल सकते हैं कि अपने दृष्टिकोणों में बदलाव लाएं जो सच्चे रास्ते की तरफ, जो सही रास्ते की तरफ लाए? वो कैसे हो सकता है?
तो 2500 साल पहले ही इसके बारे में कुछ बताया है, अगर लोग उसको मानेंगे नहीं मानेंगे क्या कहना है।
विष्णु जी से अनुरोध करूँगा अनुभव दी अदब 3 बार, आशा 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 3 बार, आनंद 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 4 बार, बाकी 2 चीजें 3-3 बार। माधव गाडगिल साहब ने आनंद दिया 4। तो ऐसे में हम जब ये निराशा को पूरी तरह से विस्थापित कर चुके हैं, अपने छोटे छोटे प्रश्नों से फिर से निराशा को स्थापित करने की आज कोशिश ना करें। नहीं है। एक वैज्ञानिक से आप कहाँ मिल सकते हैं? हम लोग सोचते होंगे कि इतने बड़े वैज्ञानिक हैं तो इनसे तो किसी लैब में किसी बड़ी पेचीदा जगह पे भेंट होती होगी। मुझे जहाँ तक याद है, ये भी भूल गए होंगे, मैं इनसे पहली बार हिमालय की जंगल की किसी पगडंडी में मिला था, शायद 25 साल, बेमरू, शायद 25-30 साल पहले। बेमरू नाम का एक गांव, इनको याद है भाई, मैं तो सोचा था 80, देखिए कितने साल हुए, 34 बरस पहले देश का इतना बड़ा वैज्ञानिक शायद 100 घरों की आबादी के गांव में घने जंगल में क्या कर रहा होगा। जो मेढा में उन्होंने करके दिखाया, जो बातचीत, वो बेमरू में हिमालय में कर चुके हैं। जो पिछले साल उत्तराखंड में तबाही हुई, ये उसके इलाके के पास के गांव थे, वहां जाते थे। आज अपने देश के वैज्ञानिक से हम क्या उम्मीद करते हैं? या तो वो जितने जल्दी हो ये कमबख्त देश छोड़ के बाहर चला जाए, या जितने जल्दी हो वो सरकार में शामिल हो जाए। माधव जी ने एक नया रास्ता चुना और उन पगडंडियों पे चले, मेढा गांव गए, बेमरू गए, पता नहीं कहाँ कहाँ गए। सब जगह का तो हम लोग को पता नहीं, हम भी सौभाग्य से एक आध जगह उनके पीछे थे। तो ये आनंद देखिए आप। बहुत सारे हम लोग कहेंगे कि ये जो प्रकृति में तरह तरह की चीजें हुई, अलग अलग युग आए, हमारी टेक्नोलॉजी ने, हमारी नई सभ्यता ने कितने लोगों को विस्थापित किया। दुर्लभ प्रजाति नाम से एक शब्द ही बन गया, एंडेंजर्ड स्पीसीज। आप ऐसा भी मानिए कि एक दुर्लभ प्रजाति का ये वैज्ञानिक है, इस जाति के ज्यादा लोग नहीं बचे, इसलिए उन आशा जगाइए कि ऐसे लोग और बढ़ सके, बजाय इसके कि हम उनको घेर के कहें कि नहीं हम भी निराश, आपको भी निराश बना के नहीं किया। मामूली वैज्ञानिक नहीं है, बहुत सारी चीजें इन्होंने नहीं बताई आज के विषय को। देश का एक बड़ा हिस्सा, अपनी आबादी कितनी, उसका शायद 5वां भाग 25 करोड़ से 30 करोड़ पश्चिम घाट के हिस्से में रहते हैं। देश का 40% पानी वहां से निकलता है और बहता है। 25 करोड़ आबादी और 40% पानी, करीब 40% का ड्रेनेज है वेस्टर्न घाट से हिंदुस्तान का।
इंसुलर इंडिया को तो पूरा है,
पूरा
ब्रह्मपुत्र गंगा,
इसको छोड़ दीजिए ऊपर का कुछ हिस्सा। उसकी बर्बादी ये देख चुके हैं, उसका वैज्ञानिक अध्ययन कर चुके हैं, उस पर जो रिपोर्ट सरकार ने इनको बनाने की का काम सौंपा, वो इतने अच्छे से कर चुके हैं, और चारों तरफ सिवा निराशा के और उसमें कुछ नहीं दिखा होगा इनको। सोचिए कि इसमें उन्होंने आशा देखी है कि ये चीजें हम कर, देश का कोई एक छोटा सा कोना अंधेरे का नहीं देखा, 40% अंधेरे के हिस्से में से निकल के आए हैं। बाकी जगह भी गए होंगे, लेकिन उस 40 की तो रिपोर्ट है, जिसको सरकार इतनी मजबूती से 1 साल तक दबाए रखी रही। शायद मिलने के बाद इनको पहुंच की सूचना भी नहीं दी कि आपकी रिपोर्ट मिल गई है, हम इस पर काम करेंगे। और जब 1 साल बाद कुछ हवा चली, तो उसमें पानी मिलाने के लिए एक और कमेटी बनाई उन्होंने सरकार ने, कि ये 40% पानी की बात करते हैं ना, हम इसी रिपोर्ट में पानी मिलाते हैं। तो आप देखिएगा कि उनके मन में कितने ऐसे मजबूत उदाहरण आए होंगे, जिससे उन्होंने ये अपना स्वभाव बनाया कि मैं निराश नहीं होऊंगा और मैं क्रोध नहीं करूंगा। आज हम लोगों का कर्तव्य है कि यहाँ से जाएं तो इसकी थोड़ी सी धूल लेके अपने साथ जाएं, 1-2 कण लेकर जाएं, और चारों तरफ जब विनाश में सर्वसम्मति दिखती हो, नदी जोड़ो हो, कई तरह के प्रश्न लोगों ने पूछे, ये सब दोबारा करके बात कर सकते हैं, लेकिन सबसे अंत में आशा है। इन्होंने जिस वेस्टर्न घाट पे काम किया है, ऐसी प्रजातियां खोजी हैं। एक मकड़ी में विज्ञान वाले नाम नहीं जानता, जिसके तार के बारे में इन्होंने लिखा है कि वो स्टील के तार से ज्यादा मजबूत होता है, ऐसी मकड़ी। तो इन्होंने इस प्रकृति के विपुल खजाने में से अच्छी चीजें भी अनगिनत देखी होती,
ये मान के हम लोग को चलना चाहिए। इन्होंने पर्यावरण के खोखले नारे भी देखे, केवल तकनीक का विनाश नहीं देखा है। वो तो देखा ही है जो हम लोग सोचते हैं कि हम लोग कुछ ज़्यादा जानते हैं, वो बहुत ज़्यादा जानते होंगे, लेकिन इनने पर्यावरण का विनाश भी देखा है कि हम लोग कैसे नकली नारे लगाते हैं। याद कीजिए 15-20 दिन पहले जो पूना में मालिन गांव में भूस्खलन हुआ और लगभग 100 से ज़्यादा लोगों ने अपनी जान गंवाई, वो विकास के कारण, अकेले विकास के कारण नहीं, पर्यावरण के कारण, जिसको हम क्लीन एनर्जी कहते हैं, वो वहाँ पे शायद पवन चक्कियाँ उस इलाके में बगल में कहीं पवन चक्कियाँ तक लगाई गई, गलत जगह लगाई गई। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि एक हाल है कि सोलर है कि बल्कि प्रसंगवश मैं कहना चाहता हूँ हिमालय के बहुत सारे हिस्से में जहाँ ये गए वहाँ बाद में सोलर का इतना अच्छा काम हुआ और उसको घोंट पीट के लोगों ने पचा के पी लिया उस साइंस को, और सोलर सेल का नाम रखा गमतप्पू, घाम में से तपता है और बिजली बनाता है। तो ये घमतप्पू वाले इलाकों में भी घूमे हैं और जहाँ पवन चक्की ने नुकसान पहुँचाया उस इलाके में भी देखे। एटॉमिक का तो उन्होंने बताया भाभा साहब से उनकी ये सब हुई। तो इन सब चीज़ों के बीच में मुझे लगता है कि एक भगवान के कई तरह के विशेषण हम लोग सुनते रहते हैं, दीनदयाल हो और क्या क्या नहीं होता। विष्णु के तो 100 नाम गिना दिए लोगों ने बड़े सुंदर ढंग से, विष्णु सहस्त्र नाम, लेकिन एक नाम हम उनका भूल जाते हैं। वो बुल्ले शाह ने शायद पहली बार दिया और बाद में नानक जी ने भी अपनी जपू जी में उसको रखा है, वो है बेपरवाह। भगवान बेपरवाह है ऐसा का भरोसा नहीं होता। वो बेपरवाह कैसे है? उसने कुछ नियम बना दिए हैं, आप उनका पालन करना चाहें तो कीजिए, नहीं तो भुगतिए। भगवान तुम्हारी परवाह नहीं करेगा। इसलिए उत्तराखंड वगैरह में जो होता है, मालनी गांव में जो हुआ, ये सब भगवान के बेपरवाह होने के नतीजे हैं, क्योंकि हम परवाह नहीं कर रहे। तो इनका आज का भाषण तो हमको परवाह करना सिखाता है और तब हम भगवान को बेपरवाह छोड़ सकते हैं। आप सब आए, खूब खूब धन्यवाद।
मित्रों, डॉक्टर राम मनोहर लोहिया का एक पद मुझे बहुत प्रिय है और मैंने उसका इतनी बार इस्तेमाल किया है, निराशा के कर्तव्य। कि अब मुझे उसका इस्तेमाल करने में थोड़ा संकोच होता है, लेकिन मुझे लगा कि निराशा का एक कर्तव्य ये भी है कि वो आशा का दामन न छोड़े, ये भी निराशा का ही कर्तव्य है। तो आज जो आपने व्याख्यान सुना वो कई मायनों में बहुत ही रोमांचक था, क्योंकि वो तथ्यों से भी भरा है और सपनों से भी भरा है। वो अपने परवाह, हम क्या चिंता करें इसकी भी हमें याद दिलाता है, क्या किया जा सकता है और क्या नहीं हुआ है इसकी भी उसमें खोज खबर ली गई है। और जैसा अनुपम जी ने कहा, वैज्ञानिक से व्याख्यान ये उबाऊ होने की पूरी आशा की जाती है। बुद्धिजीवी लोग जो होते हैं वो बेचारे बुद्धि से इतना जकड़े होते हैं कि वो रस नहीं दे पाते, पर डॉक्टर माधव गाडगिल ने रस भी दिया और बुद्धि भी दी, उम्मीद भी दिलाई और हमको अपने निराशा के कर्तव्यों की भी याद दिलाई। इसके लिए उनका बहुत बहुत आभार। अनुपम जी का बहुत आभार कि उन्होंने, जो ऐसा लग रहा था कि कुछ यथार्थवादी न उम्मीदी उभर रही है, उसका थोड़ा शमन किया। और आप सबका बहुत आभार कि आप नेमी चंद्र स्मारक व्याख्यान में आए। धन्यवाद।